The sun had just begun to slip behind the thick clouds over the city, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. Inside St. Mary's Cathedral, the congregation was gathered for the evening service. The atmosphere was filled with the scent of incense and the soft hum of the choir as they sang hymns that resonated through the tall arches of the church. In one of the back pews, Tobi Okafor sat, trying to focus on the sermon. Tobi was a man who commanded attention without needing to speak. At 30, he was the head of an investment bank, a role he had achieved through sheer determination and a sharp mind. His tall, athletic build and deep brown eyes that seemed to pierce through you were often hidden behind a facade of professionalism. Despite his success, his face bore the marks of someone who had known his share of disappointment, particularly in matters of the heart. He didn't usually attend church with any genuine religious fervor, but tonight was different. Tonight, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. He scanned the room absently, until his eyes settled on a woman a few rows ahead. His breath caught in his throat. She was extraordinarily beautiful, stunningly so. Her delicate features, smooth dark skin, and the way she held herself with an air of quiet grace stood out from everyone else around her. Her long braids cascaded down her back, and her eyes were focused intently on the altar, oblivious to the world around her. Tobi's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't felt this in a long time, a pull, an urge to know someone. Yet, just as he was about to muster the courage to speak to her after the service, memories came flooding back, like waves crashing against a rocky shore. Years earlier, in his university days, he had felt a similar pull towards Uju, his first love. The memory was so vivid it felt like yesterday. They were young and full of dreams, sharing laughter under the shade of trees on campus, talking about the future as if it were theirs to command. She was his first real love, and he had believed she was the one. Until one day, she wasn't. In the flashback, he could see her face clearly the moment she told him she was leaving. Uju's eyes were filled with tears, but her words were firm. "I'm sorry, Tobi, but I've been accepted into a program abroad. I can't stay back for us. I need to follow my dreams." It wasn't just the heartbreak, it was the shock of it all that had shattered his naive belief in love's permanence. He had watched her walk away, leaving him to grapple with the empty space where all their plans had been. Back in the present, Tobi's heart clenched at the memory. His hand twitched, and he nearly let the opportunity to approach the woman in the pew slip away. But just as he steeled himself, another memory clawed its way to the surface. Mary had been a colleague, someone who seemed to understand him, sharing his drive for success. They had been a power couple at the bank, ambitious, focused, and seemingly destined to rise to the top together. But what seemed perfect on the outside was a mirage. The day he found out Mary had been seeing someone else, someone higher up in the company, his trust was shattered. The betrayal was raw, the wound fresh even years later. She had been using him to climb the corporate ladder, playing him like a pawn in her game for power. Tobi remembered the confrontation vividly. "You were just convenient, Tobi," she had said coldly, her eyes void of any emotion. That had been the final straw that pushed him to bury his heart beneath layers of caution. Then there was Stella, the woman he thought would help him move on from his past. Their whirlwind romance had led to a quick engagement, something that felt like a fresh start. But not long after, she ended things abruptly. "You're too emotionally distant, Tobi," she told him. "I can't marry someone who is married to his work." 3 heartbreaks, each deeper than the last. Tobi had vowed never to let himself be vulnerable again. Love was a risk he wasn't willing to take anymore. But as he looked back at the woman in the church, a warmth spread through his chest. She was different. Or maybe he just wanted her to be. She hadn't noticed him yet, and he found himself wanting to know more about her life, her story, her dreams. Despite the barrage of painful memories, Tobi decided he would not let fear hold him back this time. After the service, he took a deep breath and approached her as she made her way out. His heart was pounding in his chest. "Hello," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "I couldn't help but notice you during the service. My name is Tobi." The woman looked at him with cautious eyes, her lips forming a slight smile. "Grace," she replied softly. Her voice was like a melody, soothing yet guarded. They exchanged a few words, and he sensed a depth to her, something mysterious. Though she was polite, she seemed distant, almost hesitant to engage fully. Still, he persisted. He complimented her presence, asked about her interest, and eventually managed to convince her to give him her contact information, even though she seemed reluctant. As she left, Tobi felt both excited and anxious. He had taken a step he hadn't in a long time, and there was no turning back now. Over the next few months, Tobi and Grace began to see each other more frequently. Their dates were simple, walks in the park, dinners at cozy restaurants, and deep conversations about life. Tobi found himself drawn to her mysterious aura. She was kind, but there was an air of sadness around her, a story untold. He noticed how she avoided certain questions about her past, how her smile never quite reached her eyes when talking about her family. "I was adopted," she finally shared one evening over dinner, her voice soft. "I was abandoned as a child, and a kind couple took me in. They're my family now." Tobi nodded, sensing there was more to the story. But he didn't press her. He knew what it was like to carry scars. As their relationship deepened, Tobi felt his walls beginning to crack. He saw in Grace a chance to heal, to rebuild his belief in love. He began to think that maybe, just maybe, he had found someone worth the risk. He introduced her to his friends and family, who were charmed by her grace and intelligence. But as he grew closer to her, Tobi's fears resurfaced. Could he really trust again? Was he ready to let someone into his heart after all the pain? He found himself waking up at night, haunted by memories of Uju, Mary, and Stella, questioning if he was making the right choice. Still, he couldn't deny what he felt for Grace. She was different from anyone he had ever met. One evening, he took her to a quiet spot by the lake and proposed, his heart pounding in his chest. Grace seemed shocked at first, her eyes searching his for sincerity. She hesitated, as if battling her own demons, but eventually, she said yes. Tobi felt a wave of relief and joy, believing he had finally found the one. The wedding day was perfect. The sun was bright, the flowers were in full bloom, and the atmosphere was filled with love and celebration. Grace looked breathtaking in her white gown, and Tobi couldn't take his eyes off her. But throughout the ceremony, he noticed that her smile seemed strained, her eyes flickering with unease. After the vows and the cheers, the couple moved to the reception hall, where friends and family celebrated with joy and laughter. But as the festivities continued, Grace whispered to Tobi that she had a severe headache and needed to rest. "Go ahead," Tobi said, concern etched on his face. "I'll check on you in a bit." Grace nodded and left quietly, her movements almost mechanical. After a while, Tobi decided to go see how she was doing. He walked to the room where she had gone to rest and gently opened the door. His heart stopped. There, on the floor, lay a large snake, its scales shimmering under the dim light. Tobi's first instinct was to run, his body frozen with terror. But then the snake turned its head and looked at him with familiar eyes. Grace's eyes. "Tobi, please, don't be afraid," came a soft voice, the voice of his bride. Tobi's breath hitched. He staggered back, his mind racing. What is this?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "Please, listen to me," Grace pleaded. "I need to explain." With a heavy heart, Grace began to tell her story, her voice trembling with both fear and regret. As a teenager in secondary school, Grace had felt lost, yearning for a sense of belonging. She was recruited into a secret cult by a group of older students who promised her power, protection, and acceptance, things she had always craved as an adopted child. The initiation ritual was dark and terrifying. She remembered the moment she was marked with a serpent symbol, a burning sensation that spread through her body as the cult leader chanted incantations. That was when the curse began. Years later, during her university days, the cult demanded more from her. She was given a mission to seduce a wealthy man and steal a precious family artifact for them. Grace recalled the dread she felt, the overwhelming guilt as she completed the mission, and the horror of what she had become. She knew she needed to escape, but she feared the cult's power. Grace sought out a spiritual leader, desperate for help. He advised her to renounce the cult and perform a cleansing ritual. She was ready to do whatever it took. However, before she could complete the ritual, the cult leader confronted her, enraged by her betrayal. He caused her to never find love or peace, transforming her into a snake whenever she got close to true happiness. Tears flowed down Grace's face, even in her snake form. "I'm so sorry, Tobi," she whispered. "I didn't want to hide this from you, but I was afraid you'd live like the others." Tobi's heart was pounding. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts: fear, disbelief, betrayal. But beneath all of it, he realized one thing: he loved her. He didn't know why or how, but he did. "I need some time," he muttered and left the room, locking himself in the bathroom, his thoughts a chaotic mess. Tobi sat on the cold tiles of the bathroom floor, his mind spiraling. Memories of his past relationships flashed before him again: Uju leaving, Mary betraying, Stella abandoning. Was he about to face yet another heartbreak? Was he willing to risk everything for a love that seemed impossible? But then he remembered Grace's eyes, those eyes that looked at him with fear and hope. He remembered the joy they had shared, the connection that went beyond words. And in that moment, he knew his answer. He stood up, took a deep breath, and walked back to the room. He didn't know if he was making the right choice, but he knew he had to try. "Grace," he said softly, stepping into the room. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." The moment the words left his mouth, something extraordinary happened. A bright light filled the room, and the snake slowly began to change. Scales turned to skin, and the serpent's body reshaped into Grace's human form. She gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope. You came back," she whispered. Tobi nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." They embraced, both overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that Tobi's true love had partially broken the curse. They composed themselves and returned to the reception hall hand in hand, their family and friends unaware of the supernatural battle that had just taken place. They smiled, danced, and celebrated, hiding the ordeal behind forced smiles. After a month of marriage, things seemed normal on the surface, but Tobi and Grace couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Grace began having strange dreams, dark figures and cryptic symbols haunting her sleep. Tobi noticed weird occurrences around their home, unexplained shadows and the sudden appearance of snakes. One evening, while rummaging through Grace's old belongings, Tobi found a small, serpent-shaped talisman hidden among her things. Grace's face went pale when she saw it. "It's a relic from the cult," she whispered, fear evident in her voice. They must have left it behind. They realized then that their battle wasn't over. Though Grace had found love and partially broken the curse, a dark connection to the cult still lingered. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of today's story? Until next time, take care, and stay tuned for more amazing content.